In the early 1900s, life for many people in Maine was hard. Many farmed and most worked their shifts at the mill, and they were grateful to put food on the table and pay their bills. It was hard to get ahead. When the credit union came, it made all the difference in the world. The credit union movement marked the first time in history that the poor and struggling had a means to overcome the challenges they faced when trying to borrow and save money. Boston merchant and philanthropist Edward Filene was an early supporter. With Filene's backing, his associate Roy Burgengren became a tireless lobbyist, shepherding credit union enabling legislation at state and federal levels. The Telephone Workers Credit Union of Maine, the state's first credit union, was started in 1921 with 10 employees and $1. In 1934, the Federal Credit Union Act opened the field for new institutions under both state and federal charters. With new credit unions forming and Maine's 3 existing credit unions growing, some form of coordinating organization was needed to facilitate communication and share best practices. If all Maine's small credit unions could stand together with one voice, their collective interests would be better served. In 1938, the Maine Credit Union League was formed in Portland to do just that. The main office was located inside the part-time managing director's house. In those days, credit unions themselves were often housed in church basements, kitchens, and spare bedrooms. Many volunteers helped make the movement a success in Maine, none more ardent than Jeanette Morin.
She was really
Wonderful.
a dedicated credit union person.
She went with us on organizational meetings. She went with us different places, and she's just a great lady to be around.
The commitment of volunteers like Morin set the tone for the League, which was destined to be a strong organization, even as it weathered political winds. The first Maine credit union pioneer, Boris Blumenthal, served from its formation until 1950. The Maine credit union movement, struggling after World War II, was re-energized in 1945 by a rallying speech given by Roy Burgengren to a group in Lewiston.
In the battle which now reigns in the world between conflicting ideologies, isn't it to stand united, a single all-powerful unit, increasing in strength, power, and unity with every single passing day?
In 1952, Maine celebrated its first Credit Union Day. The following year, Senator Margaret Chase Smith addressed the League's annual meeting, lending political credibility to the movement. A decade later, the Maine Credit Union League had more than 100,000 members, doubling in size in just 6 years. And there were 151 credit unions in the state. While the growing number of credit unions was good news for Maine workers, Maine bankers weren't so pleased. But the pushback from banks only served to strengthen the League. In 1968, the League launched its first statewide advertising campaign under the theme, "Your Credit Union is a Family Affair." The successful campaign served to promote more growth and entrench the movement.
Growing so fast that we never had enough money. So I'd call the different credit unions, or I'd call Al Ferguson first. Al, can you get me $50,000? So he'd call East Hartford Credit Union, and they would send up $50,000. I'd call Fraser employees in Madawaska and get some money from them. They'd $50,000. But every time that I called any of these credit unions, we never got a no. It was always, okay, we'll help you.
So as the credit unions grew in numbers and grew in asset size, they just got bigger and bigger.
In 1970, the Maine Credit Union League moved to its own office on Outer Congress Street, thanks to an innovative building fund established by requesting that members prepay their dues. Individual donations ranged from $2 to more than $12,000.
New programs were coming into play. See, like for example, data processing. That was completely new when I was there. Another one was printing.
When we were in a rented office, all we had was a small mimeograph machine. When we got there, we got to use the printer, you know, a real printing machine.
That year, when Al Ferguson announced his retirement as managing director of the league, loans to its more than 200,000 members, along with assets, had both grown to over $100 million. Ferguson passed the baton to Ted DeVoe, who would lead the league for the next 22 years.
Ted DeVoe used to be my spokesman. Every time we went to a credit meeting or something, and we needed some knowledge in reference to what's going on, I could always call on Ted and deliver the message for me.
It was the dawn of the information age, but credit union-friendly banking software was hard to come by. Still, the league persisted in its due diligence, ultimately purchasing a Burroughs B500 mainframe computer, modified to accommodate the specific processing needs of credit unions. By the following year, 8 credit unions had converted, and more were soon to follow.
The big thrust for the Credit Union League was offering online computer services. That was enormous for all of us.
We finally went on computer, and it was probably more encouraged by us because of the New Year holiday.
Didn't have to figure dividends.
Then we didn't have to figure the dividends.
Because everything was done manually. My husband's winter vacation was spent helping me post dividends to cards, and then we transferred it to ledger sheets all manually.
You know, there are a number of people in credit unions that didn't realize that we had an extra holiday or two every year because they were calculating dividends by hand, and they frequently would have to do that on the 4th of July weekend or on certainly on New Year's Day. So when technology came into play, they gained 2 additional holidays a year.
The league's real-time data processing was far more sophisticated than the competing batch system still offered by many banks. The league system, now known as Synergent, would eventually comprise more than 100 credit unions, including credit unions outside of Maine, becoming one of the largest credit union data centers. In 1977, Congress passed a law that expanded the scope of credit union services.
We offered loans and shares. Loans at 12%, shares at 6%. There was a margin. It was simple. Then all of a sudden, checking accounts came into play, and Christmas clubs and home equity lines of credit, and on it went.
Maine credit unions took advantage, with many beginning to offer share draft accounts, the better to cross-sell services, just like banks. The league continued to defend itself against the banking industry's demand that credit unions be taxed.
If you had been on the mall in Washington, D.C. that winter afternoon with thousands upon thousands of credit union presidents, boards, members, staffs walking to the Hill and petitioning them to not take away this exemption, that day will be etched in my memory forever. It showed the people in the Congress that their constituents wanted their credit unions to succeed.
By the mid-'80s, total assets of Maine credit unions had exceeded $1 billion. In 1989, the league moved into its new service center in Westbrook. John Murphy succeeded Ted DeVoe as president of the league in 1992, presiding over a membership that had surpassed 500,000. Like his predecessor, he had been an early employee of the league, growing the print shop into a department capable of supporting Maine credit unions with the marketing materials they needed to thrive.
Almost any kind of reform that you'd want, you could get from the league. And also the ideas would come from the league. See? Because you had small credit unions who couldn't do too much on their own, but with the help of the league, they could survive.
And at the end of the decade, on the heels of defeating 2 bills that would severely limit the growth of credit unions, Maine state government green-lighted legislation that allowed multiple common bond membership, as well as the creation of a no-surcharge ATM network. The campaign for ending hunger was launched in 1990, raising $25,000 in its first year. The effort quickly gained momentum, raising more than $471,000 in 2012, a new record.
It was an idea that was born out of my heart, and it humbles me that it's just grown into this huge cause that's helped so many people.
Most of these dollars are raised $1 at a time. through various fundraisers, from bake sales to raffles to other initiatives, creative ways credit unions have raised the funds over the years.
I also credit the success of the campaign to the people at the League who have made sure that it kept going.
$4.8 million has been raised since the campaign began. By the turn of the millennium, Maine's reputation as a strong credit union state was reinforced by the election of Mike Mishu to represent Maine's 2nd Congressional District in Washington, the only credit union board member in Congress. Just 5 years after the Maine Surf Network came online, the Shared Branch Network was introduced, making it vastly more convenient for credit union members statewide to access a growing number of financial services.
We have to be able to serve the members in person in the branch. We have to be able to serve them remotely through home banking, through mobile, through ATMs, through any product or service that the consumers are looking for.
Financial literacy has been a tenet of the credit union movement from the start. And if Maine credit unions were to remain viable, they needed to reach out to a new generation of members. This outreach became a Prime League initiative in 2011 with the launch of Young and Free Maine, a program aimed at those 18 to 25.
If you look at every major success that we've had, from the Ending Hunger campaign to the Surf Network to shared branching to mortgages, every product and services technology that we've been able to develop have been developed as a result of credit unions coming together and pooling their resources and making these successful products and services.
It's a success story, is what it is, and I guess anybody would be proud of success.
Getting together, helping one another, fostering the growth of an organization, that's one of the greatest reasons I can think of.
Treat your people like you would want to be treated. And that's what we did. We did that all the time.
This industry has grown, and I understand that, and I understand why. People love their credit unions.
We're very proud of the credit union system we have here in the state of Maine, and appreciative of everybody before us that has laid that foundation. And we've got some great people that are working with credit unions today that will be the leaders of tomorrow, and we're very excited about the future.